Up next in the broadcast, the ITU Plenipotentiary, or the world's highest decision-making body for communications policies, kicks off in Busan with the UN Secretary General stressing the need to bridge the digital divide. Following President Park's pledge last week to send a support team to West Africa to help fight the Ebola outbreak, the government announces that a squad will embark early in November. And as the Hong Kong protests for full democratic elections enter their third week, China's Communist Party kicks off its fourth plenum under the leadership of Xi Jinping and the buzz phrase, the rule of law. Primetime News begins now.
Welcome to the program. You're watching Primetime News, coming to you live from Seoul. I am Kang, Chery.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We begin with Korea's much-anticipated hosting of a global IT conference, the highest decision-making body for communications technologies. The ITU Plenipotentiary kicked off in Busan on this Monday.
And this year's conference aims to narrow the information gap and bridge the digital divide. Arirang's Sean Lim reports.
Connect 2020 is the vision for the ITU heading into this year's conference. It's a vision that highlights the role of information and communication technologies as a key enabler for social, economic, and environmentally sustainable growth and development. The ITU is the UN's oldest international organization and started out setting standards for telegraph services. Today, it embraces issues ranging from cybersecurity and climate change to expanding internet access for the less privileged.
ICTs are, in short, among the keys to achieving sustainable development. As we shape a new development agenda and strive for a new agreement on climate change, let us continue to work together to harness the power of technology to create an accessible and sustainable future for all.
As the host of this year's Plenipotentiary and one of the world's leading ICT countries, Korea hopes to contribute to helping other countries achieve sustainable growth by sharing its experience.
We wish to come up with solutions at an ITU level that include everyone, especially by improving infrastructure in developing countries. Above all, it is crucial to share our ICT policy experience for shared growth and mutual understanding.
The first plenary session followed on Monday, with Korea chairing the meeting as host. Equal access to the internet and sustainable growth were once again stressed as this year's keywords. To that end, this year's Plenipotentiary will also serve as an open venue to build ties outside scheduled events. From this Monday, bilateral and multilateral talks seeking cooperation in the ICT sector will be held throughout the three-week conference between some 3,000 delegates from the 193 member countries. 송지선, Arirang News, Busan.
And also at the global conference was Korean President Park Geun-hye, and she promised Korea's contributions to providing better ICT access to the marginalized and boosting security against cyber threats. Choi Yoo-sun tells us more.
In an age of superconnectivity, telecommunications and new ICT-based industries are continuously changing the ways in which we live. Addressing this year's International Telecommunication Union Conference in Korea's southeastern city of Busan, President Park Geun-hye said the rapidly developing environment poses new challenges to the world. The Korean president first referred to a widening information and communications gap between countries and regions, saying only 3 out of 10 people have internet access in the developing world, compared to nearly 8 out of 10 in advanced nations.
앞으로 전기통신과 ICT가 지역과 국가, 성별과 계층을 뛰어넘어 모든 인류의 인권 향상과 복지 증진을 위한 기술이 될 수 있도록 국제사회가 정보통신 격차 해소를 위해 적극 나설 것을 제안합니다.
President Park then talked about the need to bolster the response system against cyber threats and to systematically ensure the safety of new convergence industries and services. The Korean leader used the opportunity to promote her government's efforts to start a creative economy that converges IT with other sectors to innovate, spur growth, and create new jobs.
저는 이러한 초고속 네트워크 기반 위에서 우리 경제의 패러다임을 추격형에서 선도형으로 전환하기 위한 창조 경제 전략을 추진하고 있습니다.
Endorsing the ITU vision of ICT growth, inclusiveness, sustainability, and innovation, President Park vowed Korea will do its part by sharing its own know-how with the marginalized in society and developing countries. 최유선, 아리랑 뉴스.
Korea is joining in on the global fight against the Ebola epidemic. In the coming weeks, Korea will be sending an advanced team of officials to West Africa who will set the stage for future teams of medics. Shin Se-min reports.
A support team of 6 to 7 Koreans will be sent to 2 West African nations in early November as part of global efforts to stop the spread of Ebola. The Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Health and Defense said in a briefing Monday that they will send an advanced team of people from the 3 government agencies to review safety plans for dispatching future support teams. The government is still reviewing which countries they will be sent to, but Sierra Leone and Liberia are said to be the most likely destinations. They also add that the safety of the medics will be the highest priority and that consultations with countries that have already sent support teams such as the US, UK, and Germany were held. In addition to the manpower, Korea has also pledged $15 million in the global fight against Ebola. The worldwide death toll in the Ebola outbreak has surpassed 4,500, yet there are some positive developments. A Spanish nurse who was the first person to contract Ebola outside of West Africa has tested negative for the virus and is now confirmed free of the disease. And in the U.S., 48 people who came into contact with an Ebola patient in Texas have been taken off the Ebola watch list after showing no signs of the virus. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Moving on to inter-Korean affairs, North Korea still hasn't answered South Korea's proposal for high-level talks. Instead, the two Koreas engaged in yet another cross-border shootout over the weekend. Some say this could all be a carefully calculated move by Pyongyang. Our Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
Another shootout across the inter-Korean border has further heightened military tensions on the Korean peninsula. On Sunday, the two Koreas traded fire after 10 North Korean soldiers were seen approaching the military demarcation line near the border city of Paju. This comes just 9 days after North Korea fired machine guns at South Korean balloons carrying anti-Pyongyang leaflets.
Provocations could be aimed at banning the controversial leaflets or at getting South Korea to be less forceful on the North Korean human rights issue at the United Nations on October 28th.
North Korea has yet to respond to South Korea's proposal to hold a second round of high-level talks next Thursday. Experts say the North may be attempting to set the agenda for the planned meeting through the series of shootouts.
North Korea seems to be escalating military tensions to protest South Korea's recent countermeasures and to build up a pretext for discussions on the rules of engagement in the West Sea and the DMZ.
North Korea is expected to seek discussions on preventing future clashes at the maritime border, ending cross-border slandering, and lifting South Korean sanctions. A key issue for South Korea will be holding reunions for war-separated families. As the two Koreas remain largely divided on what they hope to bring to the negotiating table, making progress in just one round of talks could be a challenge. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
These days, it's not too hard to spot a Porsche or a Ferrari pass by in the capital city, Seoul. The market for these supercars is apparently growing here.
Right. Arirang's Kim Hyun-bin reports on the reasons behind this ultra-luxury boom on this week's Industry Insight.
Three seconds is all it takes for a supercar like this to go from 0 to 100 an hour. But it's taken a bit longer for these marvels of engineering to take Korea's ultra-high-end market by storm.
A little more than 1 million supercars have been sold here in Korea since their debut in 1987. The pace of their sales growth has been remarkable over the past 7 years, with more than 2/3 of them finding their owners during that period. And now, Lamborghinis and Ferraris are no longer a rare sight on the streets of Seoul, especially in the flashy Gangnam district.
These days, Korean consumers are placing greater emphasis on uniqueness and scarcity when selecting their vehicles.
And ultra-high-end auto brands are reporting big jumps in sales in Korea, a market where its domestic household names like Hyundai Motor Group hasn't touched. Some talk about a decent 20 to 30% rise, while others, like Maserati, are seeing their sales growing 7-fold in the first half of this year, on year.
The higher Korean won helps sales, but supercar buyers don't really feel the effects of the sluggish economy. Also, Koreans have a strong taste for luxury goods, and supercars are just a different means of showing off your wealth.
And this trend is expected to continue for now.
Ferraris limit annual production to around 7,000 every year, so there's no dramatic increase in sales volume globally. But the Ferrari headquarters recognizes the increase in demand from Korea, so the allocation size is expected to rise.
And the competition in Korea's supercar market is getting hotter, with more players like Aston Martin and McLaren also coming knocking on the door this year. Many drivers here will increasingly see their cars bypassed by the likes of Lamborghinis and McLarens. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang Sean Lim and Kang Chery from the heart of Seoul.
Begins now.
Primetime News, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
Some of the industries that have kept the Korean economy moving forward may be starting to lose their competitive edge. And this is raising questions about how Korea can change its economic structure to ensure sustainable growth. Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
Korean firms that ply their trade in the industrial sector are calling for more deregulation to improve business conditions. To achieve that, the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry submitted a proposal to the government on Monday.
The Korean economy is currently stagnant and is in need of structural reforms through deregulation. There's a decline in demand due to the maturity of the market, while cheaper goods are being produced in neighboring countries like China and Japan.
The calls are perhaps loudest from those involved in the mobile phone, shipbuilding, and automobile sectors. They have positioned themselves as three of the so-called pillars of the Korean economy, but are now seeing their dominance diminish as the rates of increase in sales and operating profits are on a sharp decline. In a survey of 176 local companies, the rate of increase in sales among smartphone companies show a steep decline, recording a more than a 9% drop in the first half of this year. The shipbuilding industry finds itself in a similar position. Some, like Hyundai Heavy Industries and Samsung Heavy Industries, even recorded operating losses in the first 6 months of the year. Of the three, the auto sector appears to be faring the best, but sales are starting to sputter as the rate of increase in sales came to 1.5% in the first half of this year. The Park Geun-hye administration has been calling for deregulatory moves in the industrial sector, but its efforts are being stifled by the rising number of regulations from municipal governments and passive behaviors of civil servants when granting approval for business licensing. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The latest iPhones will soon hit shelves in Korea, but one firm here in the nation wants to block that. A Korean venture company has filed for an injunction that would ban sales of iPhone products in Korea. Mobile messenger company InfoZone claims that Apple's iMessage function infringes on its original patent. Apple has included the feature which allows users to send free text messages to one another on its iPhones and iPads since 2011. InfoZone says it notified Apple Korea about the infringement in May, but received no response. A judgment on the injunction could take up to 3 months. We've heard that if and when the two Koreas become a unified Korea again, the economic potential stands to be great. And here's another projection to support that claim Seoul's Unification Preparatory Committee forecasts that the gross domestic product per capita for a unified Korea would rank second among G20 countries by the year 2050 at an estimated $73,000, which trails only the United States. That's about $10,000 higher than what the figure would be for a still divided South Korea. The committee did note, however, that the economic boost would only be possible if unification occurred peacefully and if Pyongyang adopts a market economy.
Pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong have lashed out at the city's chief executive as they deny allegations of foreign external influence in the civil unrest.
With more, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, these demonstrations have paralyzed parts of the city for the past 3 weeks. What's this latest issue of contention for this movement?
Well, tensions soared on Sunday when Hong Kong's chief executive C.Y. Leung accused what he described as external forces of playing a role in the protest movement that has gripped the city for 23 days now. Student activist leaders have slammed the comments as irresponsible, rejecting the claims as baseless. The escalation in rhetoric comes ahead of talks slated for Tuesday between top city officials and student leaders. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also reiterated its call on Monday for foreign powers to stay out of the country's internal affairs, blaming them for interfering in Hong Kong's political crisis.
They encourage, instigate, and support illegal activities such as Occupy Central in Hong Kong. I want to reiterate that affairs in Hong Kong are purely domestic affairs of China. We resolutely oppose any foreign forces who attempt to intervene in the affairs of Hong Kong in any form.
Meanwhile, hundreds of top leaders from the Communist Party have opened a key meeting in Beijing. Authorities there announced earlier that the main theme for the policy-setting meeting, known as the Fourth Plenum, would be the rule of law. President Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign is expected to top the agenda during the 4-day political gathering. That said, experts are also looking for judicial and economic reforms that will guide Chinese society in the coming years. And turning to the Middle East, the U.S. military has carried out crucial airdrops of supplies to Kurdish forces after weeks of fierce fighting against Islamic State militants near the Syrian town of Kobani. The U.S. Central Command said Sunday it had delivered weapons and medical supplies to the Kurds, who are trying to stave off an advance by IS forces in the region. Amid the fighting, the UN humanitarian chief Valerie Amos visited a refugee camp on the Turkish side of the border.
We have over 5,000 people, half of them children, living in a situation where they're being supported by UNHCR, by the World Food Programme, by UNICEF, AFAD and other partners that have come together, recognizing that the children need psychosocial support.
The United Nations estimates more than 250,000 residents from Kobani have been displaced due to the intense violence this past month. Turkey says it is already hosting 1.3 million Syrian refugees, and officials predict the relief efforts has so far cost the government more than $3 billion. And shifting back to Asia, Joko Widodo was sworn in as Indonesia's 7th president on Monday at a ceremony in Jakarta. The 53-year-old took the oath in front of hundreds of members of parliament as well as top foreign delegations. International leaders attended the ceremony, including U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott, as well as heads of state from Singapore and Malaysia. Widodo had won a narrow victory in July's election, representing the country's first leader, not from the political or military elite. Though untested on the national and international stages, the former governor of Jakarta vowed to bring about a brighter future for his people.
The government I lead will work hard to make sure every citizen in our country can be served by us. I also call out to all institutions to unite and be responsible to their correspondent task.
Political watchers, however, say Widodo still faces enormous challenges ahead during his 5-year term, among them being fierce opposition in Parliament regarding his economic and political reform drive. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Stephen Che with your sports rundown. Let's get started on the KBL hardcourt for the lone matchup that took place on Monday evening. The Samsung Thunders hosted the ET Land Elephants in Seoul. Now the Elephants in their fourth away game to start the season has Ricardo Powell working the paint for 16 points en route to the 47-36 lead into halftime. Now we fast forward all the way to the fourth quarter. Samsung's Keith Clanton ties it up with 2.5 minutes to go, but ET Land puts in the dagger, following up with 5 points, including a 3 by Lee Hyun-ho, and 5 hit double figures for the Elephants as they beat the Thunders 85-79. And we have more games on the night, this time over to the V-League. The men were in action with the LIG Graders facing the KEPCO Vic Storm for their first match this season. Now the hosts set the tone, breaking through for the first set 25-22. But the Vic Storm pressed back, taking the second and the third 25-16 and 25-18. And with new recruit Mitar Zurich on the attack, KEPCO continued to spike down LIG in the fourth set, taking it 25-20 and the match 3-1. We now head to the greens, first to the PGA. Ben Martin beat the field at the Shriners Hospitals for Children Open, the second stop of the tour this season. His eagle on the 16th hole as part of a 4-hole, 4-under rally to end the final round helped him seal his first ever tour victory, finishing at 20 under overall. Meanwhile, on the ladies' side, the LPGA announced that South Korea will host the biennial International Crown in 2018 for the first time outside the U.S. Spain won the inaugural event this year. South Korea came in third. And finally, over to the U.S., the NFL's Denver Broncos quarterback Peyton Manning continued to cement his place as one of the greatest players in the sport. In the 42-17 sacking of the San Francisco 49ers Sunday evening in Denver, Manning threw 4 touchdowns, breaking the career touchdown record of 508 set by Brett Favre by 2. Among the plethora of records he's set already, he's now the passing touchdown leader in a single game with 7, single season with 55, as well as the career total leader with 510. And that wraps it up for now. Stay tuned for your weather up next. Have a great night.
Hello, I'm Kim Bo-kyung with weather updates. We got off to a rainy start to the week here in Korea. Now, while most central regions have cleared up, showers remain down south. But we're not done with the rain yet. Downpours will pick up overnight and could be accompanied by stormy conditions. Expect over 120 millimeters for southern areas where a pre-heavy rainfall watch has been issued and up to 100 millimeters along the southern coast. This round of showers will gradually bring down temperatures, and by Thursday, morning lows will dip into the single digits. Otherwise, typical late autumn weather is forecast to return towards the end of the week. On to Tuesday's readings. Seoul remains relatively low at 16, Gwangju and Busan 21. On to other regions. Daejeon and Dokdo reach 17, Mount Kumgang hits 8. Make sure to have an umbrella with you when heading out. That's all the updates I have for Korea, and we leave you with the international weather.
All right, that's primetime news for this Monday. I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Kang Chery. We'll see you again soon. Have a great night.